spelled smog. It's not AU, it's not the desolation of, it's not from the Hobbit, it's not J.R.R. Tolkien. It is smog, a form of pollution. That the word comes from a mixture of smoke and fog, and it is a pollutant that is produced when cars and factories burn certain fuels. It produces a chemical that reacts with sunlight, forming smog. And smog is basically a toxic gas that can irritate and damage a person's lungs. What's that? All right, so this gas, if a person has emphysema, asthma, it can really irritate that and make those conditions worse. It can damage healthy lungs even. In areas where smog is a common problem, when you look at the weather report in the morning, it will tell you, the temperature and whether it'll rain and if it's going to be cloudy, but also gives a smog index, which tells you sort of how much of this pollution is in the air on that day. And on days when it's bad, there may be a smog warning, which they say people should not be outside exercising because they would be breathing in too much of this pollution. Or people with respiratory illnesses shouldn't go outside that day, they should stay inside. So it can be a major problem, especially in some specific cities. Cities that lie within a valley, often smog will settle in the valley and become a worse problem there. This is a picture that shows Beijing, China, on a day when there was no smog and when there was, and you could see the difference. That's not fog, that's pollution that's making it so cloudy there at ground level. So it can get very bad. All right, the next one is ozone depletion. Does anybody know anything about the ozone layer? Right? Sort of, not exactly too much sunlight.
It protects against radiation.
Yeah, it protects against ultraviolet radiation. So, when the sun's energy reaches the earth, it's made of visible light, okay, as well as ultraviolet radiation, infrared. There's all sorts of types of radiation that comes with sunlight. This ozone layer, this thin layer, very, very high in the atmosphere, filters out much of the ultraviolet radiation. And that's a good thing. Because what does ultraviolet radiation do? Yeah, it can damage our cells. In fact, it does. Even with the ozone layer, what is it called when ultraviolet light damages your skin cells? A sunburn. It's the cause of the sunburn. Okay? And as you know, I'm sure, prolonged exposure to ultraviolet radiation increases one's chance of what? Skin cancer and eye cancer as well. So this layer of gas high in the atmosphere helps block it. Now the problem is that there are chemicals that destroy the ozone layer. These chemicals are called CFCs, chlorofluorocarbons. And CFCs work their way up high into the atmosphere and sort of eat away at this ozone layer. And as it becomes thinner, it means more ultraviolet radiation reaches the earth, which means a higher incidence of cancer. Abhi?
I was reading this article, and there's this proof that bees can see ultraviolet.
Mm-hmm. So this picture shows in 2005 there was scientists mapped a significant hole in the ozone layer, where basically it was all gone in Antarctica. Around Antarctica at the South Pole, basically this ozone layer was gone, allowing larger amounts of ultraviolet radiation to reach the Earth. The good news, though, is that countries around the world got together and made an agreement to drastically reduce their production of CFCs. CFCs used to be in all aerosol cans, spray paint, refrigerators, air conditioners. Since this Montreal Protocol, which helped to reduce this, there's much less CFCs being used in the world. And also scientists have seen the ozone layer holes stop growing and even start to repair itself over time. So by getting together and coming up with solutions as across the globe, there can be some help for some of these environmental issues.
Are there like ways to help like repair those?
No, not really. Like people, I've heard scientists talk about trying to release ozone to reconstitute the ozone layer, but it's also a pollutant that's harmful for your lungs as well, so it's something you have to be careful of. All right, the final environmental issue we need to talk about is global warming. Perhaps a better term would be climate change, because it's more than just the warming of the earth. There's more to this than that, but we'll call it global warming for now. And global warming is that the average temperature of the earth is increasing. That's a fact. Okay? And this increasing temperature poses many problems. It's caused by, what's causing climate change? Does anybody know why it is happening? Brandon?
Greenhouse gases or trap heat.
Yeah, it's because of something called greenhouse gases. And the biggest one that humans release by burning fossil fuels is what? Thomas?
Carbon dioxide.
Yeah, carbon dioxide. When carbon dioxide accumulates and builds up in the atmosphere, it leads to what we call the greenhouse effect. It traps heat like a blanket. And this carbon dioxide obviously comes from the burning of fossil fuels. You can think of it as a blanket in that the more carbon dioxide, it's a thicker blanket, which doesn't allow heat to escape, which leads to the earth becoming warmer. So, it'd be nice to be a little warmer sometimes, wouldn't it?
No.
Why is this a major problem? Maddie?
Ice is melting and Arctic animals are losing their habitats.
Yeah, one important thing is melting of ice. As the earth is warmer, obviously, some ice is going to melt. Where are there large patches of ice in the world? Antarctica? The Arctic? Greenland? Okay? These are areas that have huge amounts of ice. But as the earth warms, much of that ice is melting. This, I'll show you on the next slide, I guess. So that melting ice, when it turns into liquid water, needs to go somewhere. Where does it go?
On land. The ocean.
Into the oceans, causing sea level to
Rise.
rise. And that is a major problem. Okay? Because rising sea level leads to flooding. Also, as the ocean becomes warmer, the heat energy stored in the oceans is the fuel for tropical storms and hurricanes, okay, typhoons. And so as the oceans become warmer, those storms become more and more intense. We have had record numbers of category 4 and 5 hurricanes recently because of this warming of the earth. It also leads to a whole host of other problems. Plants produce more pollen when it's warmer, which leads to more allergies. Mosquitoes can live in a wider variety of habitats as they get warmer. So mosquitoes that carry disease are moving farther and farther north where they did not used to live. Heat waves increase, and heat waves kill hundreds of thousands of people sometimes. So all of these environmental issues are impacted by the warming of the earth. Now this has mainly been a problem since the middle of the 1800s because that is when we started using fossil fuels in greater and greater amounts. And anytime we burn fossil fuels or anything else for that matter, we are releasing carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. Matt?
When you said like the ice is melting, it would just get evaporated like eventually.
Some will get evaporated, but it basically all goes into the ocean at some point, causing the sea level to rise, right?
Well, wasn't like if the ice freezes, like traps CO2 in it, so when the ice melts.
Sometimes it traps little pockets. Also, well, if we look at this picture, another slide from here. This is, so the reason that these gases trap heat, they're called greenhouse gases because they act as a greenhouse. If you've ever been in a greenhouse on a sunny day, okay, real hot. If you've been in a car when the windows are up on a sunny day, or when you get in your car after you're in the store, how is it on a sunny day? Really hot. That is because the glass in the windows, it allows sunlight in, obviously. It's transparent to sunlight. When that sunlight hits the car seats and the interior, it warms up. But then, can that heat escape? No. The heat gets trapped in there. So you have energy coming in, but heat unable to escape, leading to temperature increasing higher and higher. That's exactly what carbon dioxide does. It allows sunlight through, but when heat starts to be released, it gets blocked and it stays at the Earth's surface. I mean?
So that's sort of like sometimes when you put a seatbelt on, you like kind of burn yourself.
Yeah, because it's heated up in that car. Now this explanation you're going to see in this next video,